Um, Right out of the gate, I don't think anyone could ever be prepared for something like this. So, The Substance is a film that I finally got around to seeing. I know a lot of people have already said their piece on it, and I was hesitant at first to even make a video about it because I feel like I'm pretty late to the party and I don't really know what I can add to the conversation. But considering it genuinely blew me away exactly what I was seeing on screen, and I was not prepared at all for what this film tackled, I felt that I could at least make a quick little spoiler video. We'll see how quick this is, where I talked about what worked for me in the film and what I appreciated and all that stuff. So I'm just going to tell you right now, if you haven't seen the movie, don't even bother watching a trailer or anything. If you can go in as blind as humanly possible, that is the best way to experience this film. I saw a trailer at one point, or maybe it was just an ad, but it didn't tell me very much of anything. It was super vague, and that is the best kind of marketing that this film can receive. Now, I will say, this is a body horror film. It tackles some pretty gnarly topics and has some pretty insane imagery. This is not going to be for everyone, I can tell you that right now. I was not even convinced at first that it was going to be for me, but I was just curious because it had been getting a lot of praise, and thankfully, I walked out pretty entertained. But some people might not gel with this as much as others, so just know that before you go and see it. However, if you are willing to see it, try to avoid the trailers like the plague. I think you'll have a much better time. And now we are going to get into spoilers because there's no way I am going to be talking about this movie without getting into the explicit details and not be dancing around the topics every single time I want to talk about something. So we're getting into spoilers in 3, 2, 1. Spoilers begin now. All right, elephant in the room. Demi Moore, great actress. I really like her in A Few Good Men, and I know there's probably a billion other things I could see that have her in a more prominent role than that, but that's the movie I know her from. I need to check out more of her stuff because if this film did anything for me, it won me over and made me go, yeah, I need to check out more of her catalog. Her performance in here was great. Like, Oscar level, in my opinion. And if the Academy snubs her for that, then we riot, because what is even the point if not all films from all different genres can be represented at the Academy? Like, come on, guys. I know you guys got to stick up your butt about horror movies and comic book movies, but give this one a chance, please. At first, I was really worried we weren't going to get really all that much of her past the first act, because when they made the whole switch with this activator and everything to Margaret Qualley, who is also great in this role, and they work so well together playing the younger and older version of this character, I just was really worried that this was all going to be dominated by Margaret Qualley and not have as much Demi Moore, because I had heard a lot of high praise about her, and I was worried like, oh man, is she just going to be slumped over on the floor for the entire movie, and this is going to be another Lily Gladstone situation where the performance is praised, but you know, all Lily Gladstone did for the bulk of Killers of the Flower Moon was be sick in bed, so it was really hard to judge her actual acting prowess. And thankfully, that is not the case here. We do get plenty of balance between both Margaret Qualley and Demi Moore playing these characters. So that was at least a relief as the film progressed. I also just love this concept that they're introducing here with the substance, how they basically have everything packaged so perfectly that it is stupid proof at this point. Like, they have it broken down into the most simplistic steps for her to follow. And this is great because not only is it, like, you know, reasonable for her to follow and simple enough for her to understand without being instructed by someone else in universe of this film's continuity, but also it's really easy for the audience to understand and grasp without being lectured by some scientist as to how it works or shown some demonstration video like they do in just about every other movie where they're introducing a bunch of science fiction mumbo jumbo. No, we actually get something where no lines are spoken whatsoever. And yeah, we get that little video or whatever, that commercial when she plugs in the flash drive into the TV and everything. But when she's actually using the substance, because that whole thing was very vague and it doesn't tell you anything, much like the trailers for this film. So it's funny how that works. But when she's actually opening her package and looking at the devices and everything, it's all laid out, and so much is saved in terms of exposition dump that we are able to just convey everything visually And that just works so much more effectively. I love when films find creative ways to deliver exposition without just having someone stand there and give a 5-minute monologue as to the logic of this movie. And yeah, I'm not gonna lie, when they got started with the whole thing and she's crawling out of her back, like, oh my god, like it's weird, man. Like, this movie goes crazy. And I remember thinking, like, geez, okay, well, what's next? Because admittedly, I did hear from other reviewers and whatnot that just when you think this film has reached its peak in terms of craziness, it keeps on going and keeps one-upping itself. Personally, when she was crawling out of the back, I thought it was going to be a lot more bloody and just messy and just, you know, Terrifier levels of graphic. But I think they did it in a way where they didn't have to show so much, where to the point where it wasn't so gratuitous, yet it still conveyed exactly what you needed. You get Demi Moore's reaction as to what's coming out of her back. You get glimpses of what's happening, and that's all you need, and it really works very well, as opposed to just like having, you know, some kind of CG backburst where there's like blood flying in every direction and then something crawls out like a xenomorph, an alien. I think they did this in a very unique style that worked within the confines of this film. And I don't know, it stands on its own as opposed to a lot of the other gore. Which, speaking of gore and all this crazy body horror stuff, I think that when it comes to this type of work, practical effects are obviously the way to go. People in the horror community have been saying this for years. It always looks better when you're doing practical effects as opposed to just CG drivel that is obviously going to be dated as technology evolves. But practical effects, you look at The Thing from 1982, you look at The Thing prequel, reboot, whatever that was supposed to be from 2011, night and day how well those effects hold up. The 2011 one looked dated even back then, and the 1980s version looks incredible still to this day. When you stick with practical effects, it makes it believable within the confines of reality because it is a real thing, and you're not having to play up, oh, do the pores collapse, and does this match, and do we have the correct light framing? No, just make a practical thing. How bad would it have looked if Demi Moore came out in her freaking Gollum form in the third act of the movie and it was entirely CG? That practical suit that she's wearing looks so much better and so much more grotesque because it looks unnatural and it is practically done. I also really like the rules of how this works, how you have to trade off every 7 days, and if you spend too much time in one form outside the other, then there are consequences that happen. We see that when Demi Moore, all of a sudden her finger gets all old and decrepit, and then soon enough Sue starts exploiting her for all her worth, and then she starts getting completely disfigured to the point where her hair's all grayed out, part of her face is aged, her leg is all swollen and arthritic, and that one scene where she stretches it out, just, yeah, there's moments that genuinely got an audible reaction from my theater. That was definitely one of them. I also just love the supporting cast here. You got Dennis Quaid as just the most obnoxious human being ever on the planet, and he's hilarious. I mean, he's hilarious in a satirical way. The guy's a complete and utter maniac. I mean, right away when we're first introduced to him, the camera's positioned on top of a urinal, and he gets right up to the urinal as he's taking a leak. He's on the phone, cussing out whoever he's talking to, being as obscene and perverse as you can possibly get. The camera is kind of at this bowed fish lens effect on it, and whenever he was on screen, the camera was always different. There was just something different about it, and it made it like so emphasized on him, and I really like that just because it made him as pronounced and loud as the film wanted you to feel him to be, and this just worked really well, I think. So when you get into like the body horror elements, there's a lot of inspiration from Cronenberg, or at least I assume. I honestly haven't seen a Cronenberg film. I'm sorry. Don't hate me. And then it goes completely Resident Evil in that last act with the freaking Monstro Elisu or whatever they were calling it. At first I thought, okay, there is no way this is actually going to keep continuing. There were multiple points in the movie where I thought it was going to end and then just kept going and going and going. And this isn't the problem because I had a great time in the theater. And even though this movie's 2 hours and 22 minutes, I didn't really feel like it took forever to get to the end of the film. Yes, there were sequences that kept following other sequences, but I'm not really complaining because I was entertained and engaged the whole time. And when they brought in this Monstro Elisu thing, I was like, what is going on? Did they push it too far? Because then things start getting too cartoony and people start freaking out and, kill the monster! Ah, it's a freak! Kill it! And I'm like, okay, are they going too far? Like, did they miss their mark or whatever? And then all of a sudden she goes, it's still me. I'm the same person still. And it clicked in my head right in that moment. I'm like, oh, yep, I get it. Now, obviously, the whole film is a commentary on beauty standards, right? You got Demi Moore playing this actress who was, revered in her heyday and now is being phased out by her producers because she's too old and doesn't have it anymore. And the fact that you cast Demi Moore in this role, I'm sure she can probably relate to this in a lot of ways. And this just drives home the point even further because it's like, how stupid do you have to be to look at Demi Moore and say she ain't good looking anymore, she needs to be phased out and replaced with someone younger? The woman is 61 years old, and she still looks incredible. Like, if you are a Hollywood executive telling her she doesn't have it anymore, you are sorely mistaken. You need to take a long, hard look at yourself in the mirror sometime, bro. And so this whole theme of, her balancing her life with Margaret Qualley as Sue, and Sue is just this super attractive, perfect figure, beautiful woman who is young enough to appease the producers and also garner every male's attention in her vicinity. And she's having success doing her show and whatnot, rising to stardom. Meanwhile, whenever she has to switch back into Elizabeth, she's just kind of, sitting on the couch, eating chicken, watching TV, and not really doing much with her life. And that's kind of a commentary on, like, what are you if you're living in the past the whole time? And so by the time you get to the Monstro Ella Sue thing where she's all disfigured and disgusting looking and she's saying, but I'm still me, while everyone freaks out and starts berating her, it clicked in my head at that moment that this is the plastic surgery phase for all these actresses, isn't it? Because that's basically what happens, right? These actresses who reach middle age and are still beautiful and still look incredible for their age are then told by people that they aren't meeting the proper beauty standard. And so then they start modifying their body. And then by the time they come out of it, because the whole point of this procedure is to appease these people. And then when they come out of it, people start mocking them for looking disfigured and heinous and just wrong. Why did you do that? Oh, you were so beautiful before. Now you look all messed up in the face and whatnot. And that's what this is an allegory for. And I think that works really, really well. And it doesn't even have to relate to the older actresses because Monster Ella Sue came out of Sue, right? So you could even say that about the younger actresses who are so good looking but still feel pressured to live up to these beauty standards and then wind up doing all these plastic surgery, Botox things to modify their appearance and then feel self-conscious about it because they are so pressured by all the people around them. It works both ways, and it's a very, very effective way at tackling this topic without getting so ridiculously preachy and just serving it on a silver platter. I think this film tackles commentary in a way that does it far better than other movies that I've seen recently. For example, this is an interesting concept that is supported by its themes and by its messaging, as opposed to using the concept for a platform for the messaging. I think that Barbie, while a funny movie, definitely was pretty ham-fisted with its messaging and didn't use it in the correct way to convey it to the audience, and so a lot of people found it very preachy. But when you look at something like Get Out, where the messaging is baked into this concept, you want to talk about things like racism in the world, and so you bake it into this concept of these rich, evil, white elitists who are exploiting black people for their, physical attributes that are greater than that of white people. Then suddenly you have not only an interesting concept, but provide the audience with interesting perspective into this idea, and then can open the door for that kind of conversation about that topic. That's what the substance does very effectively and keeps it from being some preachy gobbledygook, just artsy fartsy pretentious piece of cinema. It appeals to people who like art house cinema. It appeals to people who like body horror and just horror in general. And it appeals to people who are just looking for a new original concept to stand out amongst all these sequels and remakes and blockbusters and flopbusters at this point. They just want a new idea starring a capable actor who can deliver an incredible performance and leave a lasting impression through the power of storytelling. And I think The Substance does a great job at all of this. If there is one bit of criticism I can lob at this film, and this is a double-edged sword because obviously I don't really know how else you would have done it, but personally, I am not a fan of films that overuse nudity or have gratuitous sexual scenes and stuff like that. And while there's no outright sexuality being displayed, there is a fair bit of nudity. I mean, when you have Margaret Qualley coming out of her back and everything, like, they're both entirely naked and whatnot. And it would be hard to talk about this and address this topic without showcasing,